Hi everyone, welcome to our fireside chat. I'm the editor of eMed, which is a Kauffman Foundation website for life science and digital health entrepreneurs. And I'm here with Dominique Pahud, who is Director of Innovation and Networks at the Kauffman Foundation. So the title of our chat is Access, the Great Opportunity and Challenge for Digital Health Entrepreneurs. And I wanted to start with, Dominique, you talking about what you mean by the term access and why it's important for digital health entrepreneurs.
Sure. As you all know, digital health has been really, really hot over the last year or so, and you have a lot of very talented entrepreneurs entering the space to try and solve some of our big problems and are coming up with some really great technologies and great ideas. The challenge for them is to actually test and deploy their technologies within the context of care. Hospital, community clinics, etc. And it's a new, those folks in those environments are not used to working with entrepreneurs, and it's a big hurdle that they need to overcome in order to really deploy their innovations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do you want to expand a bit more on how it's both an opportunity for digital health entrepreneurs and a challenge? What are the opportunities to getting this type of access, and then what are the challenges that they face?
Sure. So any innovator that has a great idea still always has a lot to learn, and being able to partner and team up with care teams and prototype and test their innovations enables them to learn a lot about what works and what doesn't work, so they can iterate, improve, and then eventually deploy what would be a more valued product to patients and other customers. In terms of the challenges, again, is being able to be in the trenches, being able to work with providers and other stakeholders that are willing to work with them as partners and rough it out in the early stages where things are not always working as perfectly as initially intended. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on eMed, we covered the work of C3N, which is a collaborative chronic care network that was born out of Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And so I wondered if you could talk about C3N as a model for a care network that's providing this type of access for entrepreneurs.
Right. So maybe I'll give a little bit of background in why I care, why the Kauffman Foundation cares about this. So again, we've seen a lot of great entrepreneurs coming with great technologies, but we saw them as having difficulty in actually deploying it. And so we were looking for a network of care teams, of providers that were actively willing to engage with innovators, entrepreneurs, to get the benefit they were looking for the benefit of the patients. And so through this sort of national search of a network, care teams that are willing to engage, we came across C3N. C3N is very unique in that it's a network, or C3N is in the context of a larger network called Improve Care Now, where about 50 plus sites across the country in the US that actively share data and best practices. So by doing that alone, they were able to improve remission rates in the patients they treat by going from 50% to over almost 80% without introducing any new therapeutics. So it was very promising in terms of the culture of sharing, the willingness and the thirst for learning, and wanting to test and deploy what works across all sites. So actually Peter Margolis is in the room, I believe, and he is their leader of C3N, and I encourage you to follow his work and learn more about it.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to talk about how entrepreneurs have been working with C3N? Maybe Gingerio is one example of a startup that's been working with C3N. So how do they work together, and what are the entrepreneurs getting out of that?
Sure. I'm going to give a little bit more background on C3N and Improve Care Now. So basically, it's a network of care teams across the country in the space of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and they share best practices from using a sort of quality improvement lens, and they're probably the leaders in the country in that space. And so for them, again, these are pediatricians, which are a unique crowd of people. They're usually more innovative than some of their peers. And they had a group that were following a rigorous science in terms of understanding what works and what doesn't work, and then rapidly deploying it across multiple sites. So Gingerio is one of the first entrepreneurs that engage in the network, and they have sort of passive monitoring technology that enable to detect aberrations and patterns and enable preemptive care before bad events occur. And so by being able to work in that environment, that network of 50 plus hospitals across the country, they were able to really learn what works and what didn't work and enhance their product to make it actually even more impactful for the patients that they were serving.
Mm-hmm. And so as you and I have discussed previously, the C3N model is pretty unique. We didn't know of too many other examples of this type of access for entrepreneurs. So I think we wanted to maybe open it up to the audience and see if anybody else has other examples of care systems that are offering this kind of access for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, maybe I'll paraphrase this a little bit. So we're obviously, the Kauffman Foundation and some of our colleagues are all actively looking for these kinds of models, collaborative models, where people innovate together, care teams with entrepreneurs and others. And so C3N is an example of that, and Improved Care Now Network is an example of that. But very interested, again, in tackling this access, this issue of access of other models in the United States where this potentially is happening. And I actually just found out about one new one today, and I'd like to call out Josh Stein, who's the CEO of AdirTech. Josh, do you mind sharing with us a little bit what your experience has been? So you're a recent graduate of Blueprint Health. Maybe you can give a little bit of background on your company and how you've tackled that access issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the CEO of AdirTech. We make smart wireless pill bottles, and getting access was always a bit of a challenge for us. We've been making some traction there recently. But the New York City Economic Development Corporation recently sponsored this program called Pilot Health Tech NYC, where they encourage early stage companies to jointly apply for funding for various programs with large healthcare companies. So we actually got $100,000 from the NYC EDC to perform an HIV trial for our bottles with the Weill Cornell Medical College. So I think getting the government involved is great, and any program like this is really valuable for early stage companies.
Hey Josh, one more. I'm going to dive in a little bit more if you don't mind. I thought what was very interesting what you shared with me earlier today. Again, I just found out about this. Is sort of the dating process that was fostered in that particular program. Can you tell us a little bit about how institutions were able to interact with innovators and how the matches were identified and made?
Yeah, so the way this program started off is the NYC EDC contacted every large healthcare company, or virtually every large healthcare company in New York, and said, do you have any interest in working with early stage companies? So they got about 35 people in those organizations to say yes. So they advertised those people that said yes on their website, and they said, calling all early stage companies, do you have any interest in perhaps meeting with these people in a sort of matchmaking speed dating session where you have to apply to meet with them, but if you're chosen, you'll get a 15-minute meeting where you can see if you jointly want to apply for this larger program. So there were basically filters along the way where fewer and fewer companies were selected, but it was just really great to organize an event in this manner because we got to meet with about 7 decision makers at large healthcare companies within about a 3-hour time period. So it was really quick, and it's a really good way of seeing who likes you and who doesn't, and doing it in a time-efficient manner.
Anybody else in the room? I would love to hear about other examples across the country that's where this is happening today. Don't be shy. If you're shy, please reach out to me afterwards. I'd love to find out more about these kinds of activities. All right, no takers.
Since, as we can see, there aren't too many established models like this, I think another question that entrepreneurs might have is, how can I go about this on my own? Is there a way that I can get access to some of these care networks and patients without maybe going through a specific program like C3N?
Sure. These are all anecdotal from talking to many entrepreneurs and how they've actually been able to start up pilot programs. So in the context of digital health, which is the hot area right now, people that have been successful in engaging institutions to start pilots had oftentimes pre-existing relationships. So For example, a heart surgeon very interested in improving adherence and compliance in the context of organ transplants had relationships at Stanford and Duke and was able to, through those relationships, get access and start doing the pilots that she needed to sort of validate her technology, her approach, and having kids stay compliant or adherent to their meds. So that's one example of sort of leveraging existing relationships to get into these institutions. The other one is more of for most people, especially people that have a tech background moving into healthcare, they don't necessarily have those relationships, and it's a lot of hustle. And really trying to engage with as many stakeholders as possible. So understanding, first of all, what is the unmet need that you're addressing, who in the community has the most acute problem tied to this unmet need, and identifying who are the potential stakeholders within those institutions that you may want to engage, cold call, and see if you can get their attention. But unfortunately, right now, there's no easy way of doing that. It's just a lot of hard work and a lot of rejection before you get to something that's, gets your first hit, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think health systems are hesitant to work with entrepreneurs in this way? What are the barriers that they're facing? What concerns them about these collaborations?
Sure, I'll give you my interpretation of it, but I'd love for people in the room who are actually in those systems to speak about their own concerns. I think it's a couple of things. One of them, these kinds of relationships are new, right? I mean, in healthcare, relationships between hospitals, manufacturers, and other players are really established. The rules of the game are really well established, but entrepreneurs, startups is kind of new, right? What does it mean, and how do I work with them? How do I engage with them? These institutions are relatively more conservative and more risk averse, and it's kind of something that's really gets them out of their comfort zone. And they also have very heavy regulatory oversight, and in terms of HIPAA and other things, and so they're really worried about data and being exposed from a liability perspective. And I think those are the reasons why. You don't see a lot of activity on that end right today.
Mm-hmm. And before we open it up to the audience for their perspective, what would you say to those health systems who have those hesitations? I mean, what do you think they would get out of this access with entrepreneurs that maybe would help them get past those barriers that they're facing?
You know what? Is Peter Margolis in the room? Peter, are you there? Could you stand up, please, and tell you what benefit you had as an institution? So you're a leader at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Can you tell a little bit about what you got from working with entrepreneurs, and what were the benefits?
Sure. So I'm happy to make a couple of comments. It's Cincinnati Children's and many children's hospitals are interested in doing the best for their patients. So when we can get connected to some of the ideas and some of the new technologies that perhaps we don't have within our own walls, it's a great advantage for us. It also gives the researchers that we have who want to make an academic career out of changing health systems, colleagues and partners to work with.
And could you also tell us a little bit about the process of how you run it? So I think it's very interesting in terms of the culture, so how you identify the care teams, physicians in your network that are interested in working with entrepreneurs, how you sort of test it in certain sites and deploy it. So give us a sense of how that really happens and how the cultural shift occurs over time.
So as part of our work with the Collaborative Chronic Care Network project, we're using a model of open innovation that's common in other industries, and we see it all the time in our lives when we interact with TripAdvisor or make a contribution to Wikipedia. What we try to do is to make our work known to different communities that are working in areas that we might be interested in, or that we don't even know that we should be interested in. So as part of the network, there are 52 care centers, hundreds of doctors and nurses, many researchers who are involved. We try to publicize what we're doing and make the community, the larger community and the public aware of the fact that we are open to new ideas. We have social media sites. We hold conference calls that people can join. We speak at conferences like this and talk about this kind of opportunity. And as as entrepreneurs or innovators hear about us, they often contact us. And there's a process of sort of mutual exploration in which we talk about what we're working on, what they might be interested in, and if it looks like there might be mutual interest, we might hold a conference call with our care centers and offer up the ideas to the care teams at various centers to see whether any of them might be interested in getting involved in trying out a small prototype.
Thank you, Peter.
So since we have representatives here from health systems and other stakeholders, we did want to open it up to the audience to see if anybody had any comments on just what holds you back from offering entrepreneurs access, what concerns you have around this idea.
Don't be shy.
I can also watch the Twitter feed too if anybody has any questions that come up or comments. Okay. Okay, yes.
Since I'm still talking, I would make one more comment from the perspective of an academic medical center. One of the reasons why academic medical centers are often maybe hesitant to get involved with an innovator is that we tend to deal in patient care for thousands or hundreds of thousands of patients. And it can be very disruptive to bring a new innovation into clinical care delivery because we have numerous systems that we need to run, our electronic medical record, our models of practice. We don't have in care delivery the concept of small-scale prototyping well developed so that it can be difficult to try out a new idea without totally disrupting the way the clinic flows and the way care is delivered. Some academic centers are now developing innovation centers where this kind of testing can take place and it doesn't disrupt clinical care. But for many, that's not a model that's well developed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There is one question from Twitter that I thought we could address.
Sure.
Since investors and partners prefer technical founders, what advice can you give a non-technical healthcare entrepreneur?
I'm trying to understand what they meant by that question. Well, I guess it depends on the skill, right? So if you're a founder, you obviously have a certain expertise, value that you bring to your company that potentially meets a need that you're in the context of care. And so if you being able to understand really well what you're good at and what others are poor at enables you to really engage the individuals or institutions more effectively. So being able to be more, I guess, more introspective and understanding how that your capabilities could really help your customer, and that would be a big way to tackle it.
Okay, great. So Dominique, what are your ideas for new standards and models of where learning and innovation can happen more systematically? How can we improve this?
So I've been thinking about this for a lot. I mean, the last 6 months. I don't necessarily have all the answers to this, but I would welcome comments, ideas, feedback from the audience. But I would like for it to be less hard for the Josh Steins of the world and the Peter Margolises of the world on the other side, figure out how do you work together? How do we innovate together? What's the process? How do we make it seamless, more effective, and get more great things out there and improve health of patients and lower cost of care? And so part of that, as foundation of entrepreneurship and innovation, one of the things I'm working on is a number of things. One is intellectual property framework. So oftentimes, to have something new that's really, really compelling to a group of patients or institution, it really oftentimes requires multiple stakeholders working together, whether it's multiple entrepreneurs that have technologies that are complementary, whether it's the institution itself or even an industry player. It's like, how do you deal with the value that's created? And so we're working on a playbook, IP framework to help people walk through that process more effectively and understand some best practices and traps, things to avoid. And that's coming out in Q3, and we hope we'll make that available for people who are actually excited and wanting to work with each other. The other thing that I'll be working on, and again would welcome potential partners in the audience who want to do this, is create a series of events across the country where these stakeholders get to meet and do this called the speed dating version of speed dating, where entrepreneurs meet with institutions, other innovators, and really understand how they can best work together, what are some best processes, so that they could make it easier for them to innovate and more stuff gets out there. The other thing that I found very interesting as well is I've seen some startup accelerators already starting to try to negotiate contracts with the hospitals and institutions in their community, getting to know them better, understand what their criteria are, and so that when they have new innovators, entrepreneurs graduating from their programs, they have a place to go and deploy and test their technology. So those are the things I find very interesting, but I'm trying to sort of catalyze and enable more people to meet and understand what works and what doesn't work so we can see more innovation across the country.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and taking it out a little bit more broadly, how do you see this issue of access evolving in the future? Do we expect to see more C3Ns, for instance? I mean, is there anything else that you'd like to see done by organizations other than Kauffman or others to improve access for digital health entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the path, what's the right path potentially to get to a more collaborative environment, but I think there's definitely I definitely will get there. I think once we understood what's the value in having a collaborative environment where data is shared, where institutions across the country or the world get to understand immediately what works and what doesn't work and deploy the innovation in their institution, is highly valuable. We can't afford to wait 17 years for a new innovation to be deployed and used broadly in the context of care. We need to shorten those timeframes. So I would love to see the C3N type improved care now model of care be just sort of the de facto model across the country for all therapeutic conditions, all chronic conditions, so that we can do better by the patient and spend less money and waste less time. The path is, I'd love for C3N to go viral. I would love or other institutions and groups across the country that embraces this culture of sharing and collaboration to succeed, and so that we start seeing, the benefit quicker across all therapeutic areas.
Okay, so we have about 8 minutes left, plenty of time for some questions or comments. Does anybody have a question?
What do you think is necessary or beneficial from an organizational leadership perspective to create a culture in which they embrace a spirit of innovation, whether it be from outside or generating it from inside? Because I think a lot of organizations are pretty resistant to change.
Yeah, so I think the way this things works. I mean, I've seen all this is anecdotal based on what I've observed, right? But oftentimes within large organizations, you always have a subgroup of people that are innovators or innovative and want to try new things, are very hungry and want to do things. And so I think that the best first step is for the leadership of those institutions to enable the people that are curious and hungry to try it and do it. And work and actively engage with partners inside and outside their institutions. Oftentimes what happens is that as soon as they have a hit, what I mean by that is when they have success in changing one thing or another, they start having some of their colleagues knock on their shoulder or tap on their shoulder, hey, how do you do this? How did it work? And suddenly you create sort of a general movement within the institution that there's sort of benefit in working or using this approach. And suddenly you create this really exciting environment where a broader percentage of the company has embraced this culture, and then the culture over time shifts. I hate to call Peter on this again, but that's what I've seen observed at his Cincinnati Children's and other participating members that are part of the Improved Care Now network, and I think that's how you do it.
Other questions? Okay. Well, I have one. So at what point in the process do you think a startup should begin thinking about this issue of access? So, and what are the steps that they need to take? I mean, is it something that you're thinking about from the kind of idea phase, or is it something later?
Yeah, I think it's from the beginning, right? Because I mean, as you have, you're an innovator, you're an entrepreneur, you have a really great idea, you're really excited about it, you're not 100% sure about what's the associate business model and really who's your customer. And I think by engaging from the very beginning who are your potential customers, oftentimes some of which are already in those institutions, you can get some insight on what would be valuable, and two, you might have a potential partner from the beginning that can help shape your product in the way that would be very useful and meaningful to them.
And what do you think startups can do to make themselves more attractive as they are competing for this access and trying to interact with care centers and others? Is there anything that they can do to sort of break down some of these barriers that we talked about?
Yeah, I think so think about, from a very practical standpoint, especially if you're trying to get into a hospital setting, the IT department and all these people that are really overwhelmed with work and trying to just keep the things running and daily. And so for them to be willing to do the extra work and disrupt their regular workflow, to incorporate your technology into their setting, it really has to be really compelling, right? Is what you're developing really disruptive? Can it really help them address a high unmet need? And if it's not, or it's nice, it's great, but not amazing, then maybe I think there's a lot of value in trying to collaborate with other entrepreneurs or industry partners to tie your technology and to make your value proposition even more compelling, so that it makes it worthwhile for the folks at the institution, the customers you're targeting, for them to accommodate and try and use your product.
Okay. And we talked before about entrepreneurs who are trying to get access on their own using their networks, and I wondered, how the people who help entrepreneurs, so mentors, investors, attorneys, how they can help entrepreneurs gain access, or other people within their network.
I think obviously the mentors, the team that surrounds the entrepreneur or the co-founders in the beginning have to really understand, obviously have expertise from an industry perspective on what the real world is like and what it takes to be successful, and really helping them shape their product in a way that really is helpful to the other customers is probably the best thing they can do. And obviously their network, right? Who do they know, and what institutions, what kind of introductions can they make? How can they get them ready, help them get ready to actually have a meaningful interaction once they do have that interaction. You also don't want to go there too early if you're not quite ready, if you've not articulated even a basic value proposition. And so helping them walk through that sort of dance is very helpful, and to get those companies off the ground.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any questions as we wrap up? Okay. Do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, the only thing is, obviously I'm very, very interested in understanding how this is evolving. This is a very dynamic environment right now with digital health and other places where entrepreneurs are having a more active role in healthcare, which is really greatly needed. But I'm very interested in understanding or seeing what people are doing and trying in their respective communities, what works and what doesn't work. Don't be afraid to share failures so that we can all learn from it and move innovation forward faster. So please feel free to reach out to me. First, last name, Pahud at Kauffman.org. I'd love to hear from you what you're doing and what are you trying to do. And that would really help me help the broader audience, the broader community moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And I should say, if you're interested in this idea of access, we did a white paper recently on eMed about the issue. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to learn more about this, you can definitely check out our website, which is part of the Kauffman Foundation group of websites. So, okay. Well, thank you so much, Dominique, and
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.